Creation versus evolution. First, we want to start with the Imago Dei, the image of God, just to remind us of who we are. So Genesis 1:27 summarizes it. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And so we want to be reminded of this because it's so important. We were created. At least that's what we believe as Christians. But there is a world out there that has thrown that out the window, disputed that in many ways. And, my main ministry now, I guess, is dealing with apologetics to Islam. So for the last 25 years, that's been kind of my focus area, working on my PhD and then teaching at these different seminaries, and that's a lot of what I teach. But before that, I taught biology for 20, 25 years. When I got my degree, I taught up in Virginia at Norfolk Christian High School, and had a great time there. I taught biology and Bible, and then we came down here for CIU, and I was a TA for the science teacher, and I was teaching the science labs, and then he gave more and more over to me and retired, and I took on even the CIU science courses, mostly biology, but also physics and chemistry and geology to an extent. So that was fun, and I was really working a lot with the creation evolution material, all the way from Norfolk Christian days. So for 2 decades, I dealt with this topic. I would go to different college campuses around the East Coast and give talks on this. I did some debates, had a big talk at Clemson, and that was really interesting. The teacher was a theistic evolutionist, a Catholic, but he was bowled over by the evidence that I brought up. We had a good turnout there. So that was my life for a while, and I really felt like we were losing out in so many ways. But now I feel like we're coming back, but there are so many different, even creation views. And we've got to sort through them and see what's going on. So that's what I want to do today. But remember this, we are made in the image of God for a reason. What does that mean, to be made in the image of God? Well, we are created in the likeness of God and reflect his moral, spiritual, and intellectual nature. That's important. That's built into us in different ways. We have dignity and worth because we reflect God's image. We have worth in his eyes. Therefore, we have dignity among each other. We are created for communion with God and therefore capable of knowing and loving him. He wants to have that communion with us. And for a God who created the universe in such a spectacular way, that's the privilege that we have. Number 4, we have been created as relational beings designed for relationships with one another. We're not just animals in a herd. We have been given the responsibility to steward the earth wisely and compassionately. So we have a duty to fulfill, responsibility that he has given us. But he's made us in his image. So when we deal with creation or evolution, think about this. If God loved us so much that he made us in his image, then it would only make sense that the way he created our world reflects his power, his creativity, and his love. So focus on that as we go through. But then there's something called evolution. Would God use evolution? Did it happen according to the Big Bang? Well, some look at the Big Bang as just part of his work. We'll look at some of those ideas as well, because there are Christian views of Big Bang. We're going to look at four major presuppositions or filters. First, there's the naturalistic evolutionism. Naturalistic in that they don't believe in God, so they believe fully in the Big Bang and all the repercussions from that, and the fossil record of man from a one-celled creature all the way up to where we are now. Then the second presupposition would be theistic evolutionism, and we'll look at biologos, which is a new group that believes in evolution, macroevolution, but according to God's manner, let's say. Then the third would be progressive creationism, and we'll look at the framework hypothesis as well as the progressive day-age creationism, especially focusing on Hugh Ross and Reasons to Believe, which is a Christian organization that I'm quite familiar with. And then number four, we'll look at recent creationism, okay? Answers in Genesis, Institute of Creation Research, and others. So here's a way of looking at the 6 key views on evolution and creation. Start with the question, was there an intelligent agent involved in creating the universe? If you say no, then that's atheistic evolutionism. If you say yes, then you're at least going down to, is the intelligent agent the God of the Bible? If you say, well, that's irrelevant, then you're dealing with pure intelligent design, godless intelligent design, or at least agnostic to it. If you say yes, then you go down, did create humans directly without evolution? If you say no, then you're a theistic evolutionist or an evolutionary creationist, like biologos. If you say yes, God created humans directly without evolution, then you go to the question, did God create the universe and humans in 6 24-hour periods? If you say no, then you're one of these groups, old earth creationists, gap creationists, or day-age creationists. If you say yes, then you would be a young earth creationist. So that's a little flow chart of possible pigeonholes, I guess. Well, let's look at naturalistic evolutionism. This is where they say God does not exist, or if he does exist, he was not active in origins or the process of evolution. Evolution happened on its own. Living systems have a chemical origin brought about by chance combination of amino acids in an environment that promoted formation of structure, increased order over, of course, billions of years. Thirdly, gradual change between forms, or a concept of rapidly occurring evolutionary episodes, must have occurred in order to produce the developments of amoebas to man. So it could have been very slow, and at times it could have been very fast. And they would be looking for evidence for that. And then they would say the Earth is about 5 billion years old and has undergone periods of extensive geological upheaval, which generally coincide with the appearance of new major life forms. So you're very familiar with that, I'm sure. If you look at the general Big Bang theory, it would start from basically a transformation. The cosmos goes through a super fast inflation, expanding from the size of an atom to that of a grapefruit in a tiny fraction of a second. And they even have it down to that fraction of a second. And then it goes out. And then in time you have the particles, the electrons, the protons, the neutrons. They collect and they form the atoms, and the atoms form combinations and compounds, and you get the gases that you need for life, finally, in a few places like Earth, over millions and billions of years. So the Big Bang. But of course there are fatal flaws of the Big Bang. Where did the initial energy come from? Where is the necessary dark matter and the dark energy? It's still dark as far as knowledge. How did the gas clouds form into stars and planets? Because gas goes out and just filters out. How does it condense to form the stars? In fact, the Big Bang actually counteracts itself in a number of areas. Okay. Big thing is this. This is the main problem as I see it. Without God, there is nothing to begin with. And nothing cannot create something. So without God, nothing would be here. And something cannot come from nothing. So that's still the main problem of this type of naturalistic evolution. What are you going to start with? Even for a Big Bang, something had to be there. And they say, well, that little tiny atomic energy of some sort blew up into all that we have in the universe now. And now with Webb telescope and other ways, the radio telescopes and everything, we're finding it's much more vast than we thought it would be. It goes on and on and on. I don't know about you, but when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I know I'd be in bed waiting to go to sleep. And I'd try to figure out, okay, how do you get to the end of eternity? You go through all the stars and everything. Where's the end? What does it look like? And by that time, you're asleep. Okay. Number 2, theistic evolutionism. Well, any comments or questions about naturalistic evolution? Okay, that's pretty well understood. Okay, theistic evolution. God does exist, they say, and was active in the creation of matter, initial biological structure, and the establishment of natural law. Okay, God was present. He directed evolution via evolutionary mechanisms such as mutation, adaptive radiation, survival of the fittest. Not necessarily the strongest, though, but the ones that survived. The creation account in Genesis 1 and 2 is assumed to be allegorical. It contains moral and religious truths about man and God, but has little bearing on the physical act of creation. So a group that would embrace theistic evolutionism is called Biologos. And the founder there is pictured, Dr. Francis Collins, who ran the health organization for a while. He's a Christian, but here I feel like he's very misdirected and has caused a lot of consternation in this whole area to embrace evolution and then try to say this is all that this is what God planned. God was in this using evolution. So you have one of the books written by one of the followers there. It's supposed to depict, the hand of God there in the Michelangelo's ceiling picture. Hand of God, but using evolution, not man directly. So a different picture of what happened. And they would look at the Genesis days and the different events, and they would put it into the evolutionary order. So you start with the early universe, the Big Bang, energy and matter, maturing universe, solar systems, early Earth for the land, sea, and vegetation, waters with early life, vegetation on land, through evolution, and then all the different levels of growth, of development, Paleozoic, what they have now as the Phanerozoic, that's a new one on me, and of course the Quaternary, where humans would have developed and come on the scene. And you see the years that the time approximately in billions of years, 14 billion years ago for the creation of the universe, and then for the Earth about 4 point something billion years ago. Okay, so they would hold all that together. So they would accept the Big Bang. Here you look at the triangle showing the 6 different stages, the ages. So the age of the universe creation, 15 billion years ago to 4.5 billion years ago. Age of water formation, age of blue-green algae. So you've got something starting up, life has started up, one-celled creatures have started up. And you have the age of transformation of the sun's energy from being something that would kill everything to something that would bring life or allow life. The age of marine life in the waters, because that's where everything would have had to start. And then finally, they would crawl out on land, and you end up with the pinnacle, the age of man, depending on whether you're going to go 1 million years ago, 100,000 years ago, or less than that. Okay? So it's basically speciation, where you have from one-celled creatures developing into multicellular all the way up. It's interesting, I just read a couple days ago an interesting point that somebody made. We have, of course, one-celled life, mainly bacteria and things that can harm us, but also things that can help us, but one-celled. You don't find any two-celled creatures or three-celled creatures, but yet you'd think with evolution, you should have one cell and then two cell and then three cell and then multi. You have one-celled creatures, and then you have even the smallest critters are multicellular. So already you've lost the gap. You don't have any evidence of those one-celled creatures becoming more. And of course, they're not doing that today. So that's a stopgap for this speciation. Okay, and then we go to progressive creationism. And this is the one where you would have a lot of Christians following today. And so pay special attention to what's going on here. There are some key ideas that we need to understand. Progressive creationists would say that God exists and was actively involved in the cosmological, physical, and biological origins. God was active. The creation took place progressively over long periods of time, with God creating at various points in time. Now, there are a lot of people that believe this. This has become the most popular idea for Christians today. God created ex nihilo, out of nothing, the original ancestors and large groups of plants and animals, created kinds, which morphologically diverged over a long period of time to produce the vast, extinct, and extant living assemblage of life we recognize today. So he would have used what we call microevolution. Not macroevolution, but he would have created the kinds, like you have horse kinds, but then through microevolution and adaptations and so on, you would have all the different types of horses, all the different types of cows and things like that. But God would have created those kinds, and then they would have developed through microevolution, which we do see, adaptation, if you want to call it that. And one view would be the framework hypothesis. This has become very popular in seminaries today because it seems to alleviate some of the biblical problems that biblical scholars have with Genesis 1 and the 6 days, the 6 literal days. So it's not a literal day theory. It's one that looks at this as a literary type of interpretation of Genesis. So Genesis 1. So it's not a theological interpretation, it's a literary interpretation. What they're saying is that Genesis 1 is a poetic view. It's not talking about science, it's not talking about actuality, but it's talking about a poetic, literary understanding of God forming at some time and filling up. So on the left chart, you have unformed and unfilled. So in day 1, you have light being created, and sometime along the way, day 4 matches up with that. And that light, you have the light bearers, sun, moon, and stars. Very nice, literal literary connection there. So 1 and 4, 2 and 5, 3 and 6 match up. So day 2, water and sky were divided. But it's day 5 that you have the fish and the birds that fill the water in the sky, right? Day 3, you have dry land and vegetation being formed. But it's on day 6 that you have the land animals to live on that land as well as man. It's a nice form and unfilled and filled. Unformed and unfilled becomes formed and filled. So on the right, you see the different symbols there, days of forming and days of filling. Now it's interesting, I've used this as a way of showing the consistency of God. But I'll reveal to you, I'm a literal day creationist, and I'll get to that. But I would use this as a way of expressing the design of God, so I used it in a different way. But here, the framework hypothesis, and this is taught by people that you would know here in the church, even theologians. So it is a popular one, and it's one that a little bit different from what Hugh Ross would deal with. But this is becoming more popular because it kind of explains Genesis in a nebulous way, literary way, and you don't have to deal with some of the anomalies that I'm going to get into. Okay. Then you have the progressive day age creationism, and one of the most well-known advocates of that is Hugh Ross, Dr. Hugh Ross. And one of the books he wrote, The Creator and the Cosmos, is listed here. And kind of an idea of what they believe in the progressive day age. These days would be periods of time where God would have created and brought something about. So the formation of the body of the planet Earth, and a long time after that, sometime there was a formation of the atmosphere, perhaps out of outgassing or something like that. And then another period of time, formation of the dry land after it kind of settled, the oceans settled. You had some land and vegetation forming. God would have created that at the right time. Now, I've known Hugh Ross for 25 years now. In 2000, he came to South Carolina to do a series at USC, and I was on the committee. I was asked to be on the committee to bring him here. So I had him come out to CIU, and we did a roundtable there. And that's when I got to meet him, and we had lunches together and had a lot of talks. That fall, in October, he did a debate with Kent Hovind, a creationist, literal day creationist. Didn't do too well with the debate, but he did a debate on the John Ankerberg show. And I was invited to the audience, to be a part of the audience at that time. And I got to go up and I asked one of the first questions. And the question I had was dealing with the day, the word day, day 1, day 2, because it says, in Genesis 1, and the first day, day 1. It had a number. And Yom is the Hebrew word for day. And Hugh Ross believes that you can have different interpretations of day, because sometimes that day, the day of redemption, or the day of judgment, or it could be a long time, a nebulous period. And so that was what he was saying. And I went up and I said, well, of the 640 times that Yom is used in the Old Testament with a ordinal number, it always refers to a 24-hour period. So why would it be different in this particular place in Genesis 1? Why wouldn't it just be day 1? It's an ordinal number in front of Yom. And he basically went back to his perspective that Yom can be interpreted differently. It can mean a different, different period of time. So we talked about that through the years. I would see him at a lot of conferences, and we're good friends. I like a lot of what he teaches, but this is something that I would disagree with in regard to this. But it's a very popular view today, and his books are also popular. And Fuz Rana, his right-hand man, is now the leader of the Reasons to Believe. Fuz is a biologist, and I teach at Southern Evangelical Seminary. We have a creation of apologetics, science apologetics certificate program. And so when we put it together, and I helped put it together, we put both the progressive creationists, they have their classes, and we have especially Answers in Genesis doing their classes. So we try to give both views, and it's about one of the few schools, Christian schools, that will do that. And so I've been in those classes and helping those professors back when I was full-time with SES. So it's interesting getting both perspectives, and I'll mention that a little bit later. But Hugh Ross, great guy. He's very intelligent. He's an astrophysicist turned evangelist, and has put together this team. So they would look at the Big Bang Theory. They would accept it, but in the realm, in the idea that God led all these things, that he was in charge of all the different changes. And so when you look at these 6 days and the different ages taking a long time, God was always in charge, okay? God was creating, so he used microevolution, but he created all these different kinds and went through. But there are some problems. On the left side, their positions, they believe in continual creation. They believe in the Big Bang, a universe billions of years old, rather than just thousands of years old. They would look at Noah's flood as a local flood just around the Mediterranean area, but not across to the rest of the world. They would accept man-like animals that were created. So they would even say Neanderthal was a pre-man, Homo habilis. All those were creatures that were created, but they were not man. Fuz Rana has a book out on Adam, their view of Adam coming around 100,000 years ago. And it's been a popular book, interesting way of putting that together, but even then there would be some transitions in that particular man. Death and suffering, always. So you don't have a time when there wasn't death and suffering. The whole idea of death before sin in the Bible comes into play. And they would accept dual revelation as on equal footing. So they would say that you have, of course, God's revelation in the Bible, but nature itself gives us a good picture of what went on before. So they would hold both in balance, rather than saying, okay, God is the one who created nature and is in charge of that. They would say we can see a lot of truth in the natural world. So I would have on the right side the problem. Yom seems to be a 24-hour day, especially with a number before it. The flood, it says it covered the whole earth. Is it the whole earth or just part of the earth? Bible says man was created on the 6th day, not 100,000 years ago. It contradicts Scripture in regard to saying that there was death before sin, Romans 5:12. Now I would take that as death of a man. A lot of other things would have died. I mean, bacteria in minutes even. But it's talking about sin bringing death to Adam and Eve. And then another problem would be salvation is only through Jesus Christ. They would say that you can, probably more of a universalistic sense, that nature, you could find God in just realizing that, well, there must be a God that put all this together, but what God is that? And does that include Jesus Christ in the Bible and so on? So it's a little bit lax in that area. And then finally, I would say recent creationism. God exists and was actively involved in the cosmological, physical, and biological origins. The 6 days of creation mentioned in Genesis 1 and 2 are assumed to be literal successive days of creation, which God created all the major kinds of animals and plants. Now, this also would include the whole panoply of microevolution. Microevolution is not necessarily a problem for further elaboration of the different kinds, but the major kinds of animals and plants would have been directly created. The Earth is relatively young, usually estimated to less than 10,000 years old. And there are biological limits to change within created kinds. And then most pre-Cambrian rocks were created in the beginning. Much of the Cambrian to present age rock sequences and the fossils in them were formed by a universal flood. So that flood would come into a very important part. And so this is one way of looking at the 6 days of creation. Day 1, light and earth. Day 2, separation of the waters above and below. So you have the sky in between and a canopy of water above that disappeared and started bringing the rain. Then day 3, dry land and plants were formed. Day 4, sun, moon, planets, and stars filled the skies. Day 5, you would have the flying, the birds and the sea creatures to fill up. Again, you see, formed in the first 3 days and then filled up in the next 3 days. You can still have that formed and filled. And then day 6, land animals and man of creation. And what do you do with this geologic column? Well, one thing I like to do is to add a little bit of water to it, because what you see is at the lower layers, you have these sea creatures. Middle layers, you have those that can't get away from the flood. And the top layers, you usually have those that can run from the waters and so on, higher ground. So there would be some explanation value here. Well, what about the fossil record of man? I do a whole thing, and in fact, I have a book that I wrote on the how to think about evolution, the fossil record of man, and I'm going to go ahead and send that to Kevin, and he'll send that PDF to you all through the email. But I show in that you either have non-humans, like the orangutan, chimp, gorilla. You find all these so-called fossils, Australopithecus, Africanus, Afarensis, Ramapithecus. They were just apes. Combinations, you have like Homo erectus. Peking man was the skull of a man with the jaw of a chimp, and that was put together by Teilhard de Chardin, a Catholic priest who believed in evolution, was trying to prove it. But then you have also true man, and I would put Neanderthal, some of the Neanderthal, into that as a genetic malformation of man. And one of the Homo habilis skulls that I think was misidentified, found in Ethiopia, I would say that particular one would be true man. But most Homo habilis are hopelessly not man. They're very different. Anyway, you either have animals, a mixture, combination, or you have true man. Problems with recent creation. What about radiometric dating in the billions of years that is estimated for the Earth? I like to show this picture. you asked the question, how old is the Grand Canyon? I finally got out there a couple years ago with my best friend when I visited him in Phoenix, and we went up, and it was grand. It was awesome. But is it something that took place over millions of years or just thousands? Perhaps when the flood came through, the big water reservoir that was formed above by the flood, when it came down through these soft layers, because it's mostly sedimentary rock, could it have carved out just like a gully? Well, it's a pretty big canyon. It really is. That would have been a lot of water, but if it was soft sediment, you could have those gully washers. You've seen them. And we know that the oldest layers would be below and the youngest ones above. But when we look at Mount St. Helens, this is pre-1980, it blew its top, remember? So look at that picture, because this is how it looks now, okay? What happened to that top? It blew its top. I mean, millions and millions of tons of debris all over the place. It was a mess. But one thing that was very, very interesting is that within weeks, you had the water running through these soft layers of new rock formations that were formed as a sediment formed in layers as it came down and was washed in there. So in just a couple of weeks, you had 120 feet eroded away, just like the Grand Canyon. So I see the Grand Canyon as a much bigger erosion force than what you have here. But you have it. You have these canyons now that were formed within weeks. And so here you have the evolution model on the very left compared to the creation flood model. And you start with the bottom, the Precambrian would be billions, but for the creation flood model, the pre-flood, you have the basement rocks, pre-flood rocks minus those removed by the floods, thousands of years there. And then during the flood, during months, you would have aqueous burial of billions of living forms, fossils, vast erosion and sedimentation. But according to the geologic timetable, it would have been over billions of years. And then the top one, no significant fossilization or sedimentation is taking place today. And so we've been here thousands of years after the flood, according to the creation flood model. And the evolution model would also say, well, thousands of years, which is true. You have that billions of years in between. That's one way. How do you account for the immense age of the universe and the distance between the Earth and the visible stars? So I just want to take a couple minutes to show this. This is a very interesting idea put together by a man named Russell Humphreys. He was a scientist at at one of the institutes, and solving the puzzle of distant starlight in a young universe. And you look at Psalm 104:2. He wraps himself in light as with a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a tent. What does that mean? Well, past creationist answers talked about a mature creation, curved space, decay and light speed. I remember talking to one of the scientists, David Satterwhite, and he had written a book on this, and he was trying to put that forth, so spent an evening trying to figure out what he was saying. Decay of light. But you have other mature creation problems. No clear biblical support of some of these ideas. Most events that astronomers observe would never have happened. I'll show you a picture of that. And it has little explanatory power and therefore not verifiable. So, for example, if you have a star that we say is a billion light years away, typical way of looking at that is that, well, it's a billion years at least. But in this particular instance, in 1967, there was a supernova explosion, and yet you had a 6,000-year light trail, according to the scientists. So what happened if it was way out there and then it was curtailed at that point? What are we dealing with according to these time estimates in billions of years because of the speed of light? There are problems to that. Okay. Well, there are curved space problems, does not conform to present measurements on distance, parallax angular size, light intensities. You've got a lot of problems coming up with the new telescopes. The Webb telescope is showing a lot of anomalies. Decay in light speed, instruments used in the 17th and 18th centuries may have been inaccurate. Decay in the 17th century was only 0.4%. And so what do we do with the speed of light? Anyway, if you had a clock way up higher, it would go faster because there's less gravity. So gravity distorts time. The mathematics of this new theory shows that while God makes the universe in 6 days in the Earth's reference frame, the light has ample time in the extraterrestrial reference frame to travel the required distances. The visible universe was once inside an important event horizon. The visible universe was once inside a white hole. So the way I put that is that we know what a black hole is, at least theoretically, and it's said to absorb anything. So if we had a planet near there, if the Earth were near a black hole, it would be sucked in. But if you had a white hole, and this is Humphrey's idea, that everything started from a white hole. Nothing was there, God was, and he used a white hole type experience where everything came from that point. And so the stars would have been formed, but when you have something like the Earth at the horizon, time would be different. You have billions of years perhaps out where the stars are. They were shot out, they were not in the horizon, but thousands of years taking place on the Earth. So a difference in time, according to that time distortion, because of how it was developed, a black hole or a white hole. Okay? So the Earth near the horizon, just as we know when something goes into a black hole, time almost stops. During creation, if you were standing on the Earth as the event horizon arrived, distant objects in the universe could age billions of years in a single day of your time, and there would be ample time for their light to reach you. So this is just another theory that's thrown out there. This is from Michael Denton. He wrote a book, Evolution, a Theory in Crisis. These words are very, very valuable. He said, as far as Christianity was concerned, the advent of the theory of evolution and the elimination of traditional teleological thinking was catastrophic. The suggestion that life and man are the result of chance is incompatible with the biblical assertion of their being the direct result of intelligent creative activity. Despite the attempt by liberal theology to disguise the point, the fact is that no biblically derived religion can really be compromised with the fundamental assertion of Darwinian theory or evolution. Chance and design are antithetical concepts, and the decline, and this is very important, and the decline in religious belief can probably be attributed more to the propagation and advocacy by the intellectual and scientific community of the Darwinian version of evolution than to any other single factor. And that's why I spent those 15 or 20 years really developing this and speaking it out, because I saw that it was eradicating the whole belief system for Christians. And we need to do something about that. So, what difference does it make? If evolution is true, then there is no need for God, and then there is no sin and no need for a Savior. Then moral values have no basis and life has no purpose. Then man is not responsible for his actions, and then the Bible is unreliable and Christianity is false. Those are the resulting views. So we have an answer. Psalm 14:1. The fool says in his heart, there is no God.